Warm greetings to you who are listening today on the Black Voices. Tonight I want to share a story that moves slowly like an old train through memory. A story about pride. About quiet intelligence. And about the kind of dignity that only life experience can teach. So settle in. Take a breath. And listen carefully. Because sometimes the most powerful voices are the quietest ones in the room. In a fine restaurant on the quiet side of the city sat a man named Charles Whitmore. He was 60 years old. Silver hair neatly combed. A tailored navy suit resting perfectly on his shoulders. Charles was the kind of man people noticed the moment he entered a room. He had built a technology empire over 40 years. And wealth had followed him everywhere. But along with the wealth came something else. A habit of believing he was always the smartest person in the room. Across from him sat his dinner guest. A woman named Victoria Langley. 58 years old. Elegant and composed. She had known Charles for decades through charity boards and business circles. The restaurant itself had a soft golden glow. The kind of place with white tablecloths. Low jazz music. And conversations spoken in gentle tones. Moving carefully between tables was a waitress named Naomi Carter. 35 years old. Tall. Calm. And carrying herself with a quiet dignity. Naomi had worked at the restaurant for 3 years. Many customers saw only a waitress. But life had given Naomi a mind that never stopped thinking. And a patience that came from overcoming hard seasons. That evening Charles was in a playful but arrogant mood. When Naomi came to refill the glasses of water, Charles looked up at her. Then he glanced at a sheet of paper he had been carrying. The paper held a puzzle. A complicated-looking sketch of shapes and numbers. Charles smiled with a confidence that bordered on arrogance. He lifted the paper and said loudly enough for the nearby tables to hear. "Solve this and I will give you everything." Victoria raised an eyebrow immediately. "Charles, what are you doing?" she said softly. Charles laughed. "Just a little entertainment, Victoria. Relax." Naomi paused politely. Her training told her not to engage too much with customers' personal challenges. But something about the drawing caught her attention. Charles leaned back in his chair. "This puzzle was designed by one of the smartest mathematicians in my company. Nobody at my table tonight has solved it. Not even Victoria here." Victoria rolled her eyes. "You forget, Charles. I did not try." Charles looked back at Naomi. "Go ahead," he said. "If you solve it, I will give you everything." The nearby tables grew quiet. People sensed the challenge in the air. Naomi studied the paper. She did not rush. She did not show nervousness. Instead, she took a slow breath. And something deep in her memory began to stir. Years earlier, Naomi had studied engineering in college. Life circumstances had forced her to leave before finishing. Her mother had fallen sick. Medical bills had piled up. And Naomi had stepped into work instead of classrooms. But the knowledge never left her mind. She gently asked, "May I borrow a pen?" Charles handed her one with a smirk. "Take all the time you want." Naomi studied the puzzle carefully. There were geometric shapes. Angles. A pattern hidden inside the numbers. For a moment the restaurant disappeared around her. All she saw were lines and logic. Victoria watched quietly. She noticed the seriousness in Naomi's eyes. This was not guessing. This was thinking. Minutes passed. The jazz music drifted softly through the room. Finally Naomi drew one final line on the paper. She placed the pen down. And handed the sheet back to Charles. "I believe the answer is here," she said calmly. Charles laughed immediately. "Already?" He looked at the drawing. Then he stopped laughing. His eyes narrowed. He leaned closer. Victoria leaned over too. For several long seconds nobody spoke. Charles' jaw slowly dropped. Because Naomi had not only solved the puzzle. She had corrected an error in the original design. Victoria looked up at Naomi with surprise and respect. Charles stared at the page again. Then he looked up at Naomi. "How did you do that?" Naomi gave a small respectful smile. Logic does not care about job titles, she said. Only patience. There was a gentle wisdom in her voice. The room felt different now. Charles cleared his throat. For the first time in many years he felt something unfamiliar. Humility. He folded the paper slowly. What is your name? He asked. Naomi Carter, she replied. Charles nodded thoughtfully. Naomi Carter. He repeated the name quietly. Then he leaned forward. Where did you learn mathematics like that? Naomi answered honestly. College once. Life afterward. Victoria smiled warmly. That may be the best answer I have heard all year. Charles sat quietly for a moment. You know, Naomi, he said. When I said I would give you everything, I was joking. Naomi nodded. I assumed so, sir. But Charles shook his head slowly. Still. A promise is a promise. Victoria turned to him with curiosity. Charles, what are you thinking? Charles looked at Naomi again. Not everything, he said. But perhaps an opportunity. Naomi listened carefully. Charles explained that his company funded scholarships for adults returning to education. He looked directly at her. If you still wish to finish what you started years ago, I can help open that door. Naomi stood very still. For a moment the strong waitress almost became the young student she once was. Her voice softened. Why would you do that for me? Charles answered with honesty that surprised even himself. Because tonight you reminded me of something I forgot long ago. Intelligence does not belong to privilege. It belongs to persistence. Victoria nodded slowly. That is true, Charles. Naomi took a breath. I would accept that opportunity, she said. But I will earn it. Charles smiled. I would expect nothing less. The restaurant slowly returned to its quiet rhythm. But the moment lingered. Customers who had witnessed the exchange carried the story home with them. A story about humility. About hidden brilliance. About the quiet strength that often goes unnoticed. Months later Naomi returned to university. Years later she became an engineer. And sometimes when she told the story, she would pause and say something important. Never underestimate a person who has lived through struggle. Because wisdom grows quietly. Just like strong roots beneath the soil. And that, dear listeners, is the kind of story we cherish here on the Black Voices. Stories that remind us that dignity matters, that kindness matters, and that every human being carries a story deeper than what we see on the surface. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to support the Black Voices. Like this video. Share it with someone who believes in the power of human connection. Subscribe to the channel for more stories that honor wisdom and resilience. And most importantly, leave a comment and tell us. Have you ever witnessed a moment when someone was underestimated and then surprised everyone? We would love to hear your voice. Until next time, stay kind, stay wise, and keep listening to the quiet strength inside every human story. Here on the Black Voices.